What's up? It's John Samuel, and welcome to All Access Live. And we got a double special guest lineup for today. We have my friend Trudie Hughes, who is the Associate Director of Disability Services at the North Carolina Community College System Office. And then we also have Mary Oliveira, who is an Education Program Administrator at the North Carolina Community College System as well. So welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Thanks, John.
Thank you. And so, Trudie and Mary and we've been working a lot together over the last 6 months or so, I'm guessing 7, 8 months, really working on some really cool programming about getting, some disability inclusion training into the North Carolina Community College systems. But, today I really want to spend a little bit of time getting a better understand both of your connections to the community. And because I think that will help lead the why you understand the need for greater disability inclusion education, not only in higher education, but in employment as well. So, Trudie, you and I have known each other for a few years now, but, I didn't realize the extent of your own background in disability education. So if you could share a little bit about your own background and how you got into this.
Well, I don't know how I got into it. I mean, I started my career, my undergrad, was in therapeutic recreation. So I've, been always interested in working with people with disabilities since I was a young person. That's something that I've always wanted to do. So, and I think my career has just evolved over the years on the different experiences that were afforded me, unfortunately, I started really in the 80s. And during that time, people with disabilities weren't in education. They weren't mainstreamed in public education. They were housed in institutions. So I started my career actually with that experience. It was quite an eyes open experience. I learned so much from that experience, and providing people with opportunities. And I actually started a supported employment program in the institution to deinstitutionalize people with disabilities. So I was part of that movement, and we put people back into their home communities in the early 80s and trying to get them jobs. So that was an experience of itself. But then that allowed me to then work on my master's in supported employment and then going into my doctorate as well. But I've worked in a lot of different areas with traumatic brain injury rehab. I was a special ed teacher at one point in Georgia, middle school teacher. And that was a lot of fun with 6th and 7th graders. So I had a teaching license, but I also at that time realized that I liked teaching adults too on how to be a teacher. So I went on and got my doctorate and then taught for 10, 12 years at Georgia State and University of Minnesota in Duluth as a professor, teaching pre-service teachers in special education. So, I've had a lot of different experiences, whether it's working with employers in supported employment, working in rehab, working in the classroom. So that afforded me a lot of different experiences and a different insight on what employers should know, what teachers should know, what people with disabilities are faced with on a daily basis. So I'm very grateful for those experiences.
Yeah, no, there's a couple of things. It's amazing what experiences you've had. And I think, for some of our viewers who may not be, aware or understanding, can you explain what mainstream is and institutionalized education?
Well, mainstream is institutionalized is segregated. We keep everybody the same. If you have a disability, then we're going to house you in a certain facility or a certain classroom, even within a public education site. Mainstream or inclusion, and that's the more popular term, is where everybody is educated in the general education, but with supports. So
Yeah.
there would be a student with a disability, maybe, and you wouldn't stack the classroom. You wouldn't have more than 4 or 5 students with any type of disability, and I call them um, what do I just lost the word, but invisible
Yeah.
disabilities, such as learning disabilities or behavior disorders.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't stack a classroom with more than 4 or 5 students, and then you'd have a co-teacher. So you'd have a general education teacher and a teacher that is in special education, so that they can co-teach and support each other and support all students. And they are basically included in all aspects of the curriculum, and music and physical education and the cafeteria and everything, all aspects of school. So and I'm a proponent of that, because I don't, and at an early stage, the most successful students are the ones that started in pre-K and kindergarten, that, they've already gone through that, and their fellow friends and students are used to it. It's like, it's no big deal.
Yeah.
They're just like any of us. They just need a little extra help.
Yeah. That goes back to, topic I often talk about: proximity builds empathy. There's a whole new level of empathy, and at such a young age to be able to have the empathy for other students with different experiences is invaluable. And that's what we're going to see in the real world, right? It's everybody working together. And so that kind of ties into Mary. You have a professional background and a personal background within in the disability community. So I'd love to hear your your connection into it.
Well, my connection with disability community started back when I was like 1, because I had a sister that had she had cerebral palsy, and she was significantly delayed, and so I had that experience growing up with my sister. But the way I ended up in my profession is that I have had a son who has Hall-Hitner syndrome, and his condition was so rare. Could
you explain that a little bit? What is Hall-Hitner?
Yes. Yeah. So Hall-Hitner syndrome is a specific syndrome within CHARGE Association, and CHARGE, all the letters stand for something. So, columbomas, heart, retarded growth, those, so endocrine systems. And so he was born, and his most immediate need, he had heart surgery. That was his first surgery. He was 28 days old. But he also had a swallowing disorder. So we started feeding him through a tube at 11 weeks. He was given a gastrostomy tube at 15 weeks, and he was fed through that tube for almost 4 years. And he's hearing impaired, because with Hall-Hitner syndrome, the reason it's specific subset within CHARGE Association is there's a subset of people that have the same abnormal bone structures in the ears. So he's missing the outside curve of each cochlea, which means he has no balance nerve. So he doesn't get dizzy, but his brain has compensated, and he can walk and run and jump. And but he is deaf in one ear and has a moderate loss in the other ear. He has some endocrine issues. So he started. He's very small. I remember him starting kindergarten. He couldn't even open the front door of the school, but he insisted he needed to go by himself. So. He was nonverbal for a while, so he started out with sign language, and he eventually learned to talk. So he dropped the sign as he learned to talk. But he had part of his syndrome. He had apraxia of speech. So he was dealing with a hearing impairment, but he also had apraxia, which is a motor planning issue. Getting the words from his brain out of his mouth, getting the muscles to coordinate to get the sounds out. So so he dealt with that too. But so. I actually started taking some college classes. We stayed homebound for about a year because his lungs were compromised, and I started taking some college classes to try to help him, some child development classes. And that's how I started in the field. And when he was 3 and needed to go to preschool, he still had that tube in his side, and I was scared. And so I started volunteering there, and then took a TA position there while I continued to go to school. And then I finished my bachelor's degree and took a teaching position there.
Yeah.
And that teaching, so I had an elementary ed license and needed a BK license. So I ended up going to start classes, did my master's degree in BK, and then I added special education on, and I left there and went to the public school. to teach in special education. And there I taught, my last classroom was a classroom of children with autism, K-5. And then I left there and went to Surrey Community College, where I taught in the early childhood program there. And when I initially started, we had a special education program, so that was my thing to start with. And then we eventually archived the special ed program, but birth through kindergarten is dual. We taught special ed and regular ed in birth through kindergarten. And then I eventually went on and completed my PhD, and eventually ended up here at the system office.
Wow.
So
Mary, Mary, you have quite the extensive, lived and professional experience working in this. And so I think that's why I think both of y'all are, understand the need for, education of, because you've had that experience. You've had the lived experience of working with individuals, and you've seen, what people with disabilities bring to the table. And one of the things that we were talking about in the green room before this, Mary, was like, you were talking about one of your students who couldn't read in the traditional manner, right? But he was able to do it in another way. Can you explain that and kind of how you identified it and how you worked around that to really to pull out what was special about this unique individual?
So this young man, he you could just tell he was smart. He was smart, but he had an IEP with some very, very basic goals to identify a few letters and identify a few numbers. And we learned very quickly, and because he was nonverbal, and I learned very quickly using magnetic letters that he already knew his letters. And so we started with sight words, and he could pick them out. So he can read, so I would read to him, and we started out as a game. So he would point to the words, and he would play with me. So I would not say the word till he pointed to it, and he would start out slow, like the cat, and then he'd go fast. So it'd be like the cat ran across the road, And so he would play with, and I'm like, he knows what. So and then I would ask him questions about what we read, and he could point to the answers, or point to the pictures, or point to the words. And so then I was like, well, you know what? I think he can read. So I would get books we hadn't read, and I would point, and I would do the same game where I'd speed up sometimes and slow down. And then I would ask him questions, and he could point to the pictures or point to the words to answer the questions.
Yeah.
And so I knew he could comprehend it. And I would give him spelling tests of his sight words. I would give him letters, and he'd put the letters together. And then he did not want to hold a pencil. So we got him a device called an Alpha Smart, which is like a little small keyboard that you can type on. And so because we did journals, and when we gave him that, he would do his journal, and he would put he would capitalize the right letters. He would put punctuation in, and he would type these things, and we could print them out. And so he was completely he did not speak at all. He did not talk, but he could read. And when I tried to tell some people that, they would say he can't read, he can't talk. And I'm like, those are two different skills. Yep. He can read, he can't talk, but he can read. And I was like, and I can prove it, because he's comprehending it. And and that was when we were talking earlier about education. And I think a lot of times children that have a disability are misinterpreted as what their abilities are, because people assume because he couldn't talk, he couldn't read, and those are two totally different processes in the brain. Totally different processes.
I think that shows the power of assistive technology. You gave him that Alpha Point keyboard, and all of a sudden he was able to communicate what he was comprehending. And I think that's often the case in many people's cases, like with myself. How the screen reader has changed my life was it gave me the power, the ability to actually move as fast as I felt like my brain was moving, but my body just couldn't keep up. But once I got a screen reader, I was able to do all those things I wanted to do. And and I could see it's like the same situation with that student. But Trudie, you and I have gotten to know each other the last few years. You came and visited me over at LCI, I think maybe 3 years ago, 2018.
Oh yeah, at least. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
It's
And I think it is around that time. And we came down, you took a tour. And for me, one of the reasons I was really keen on connecting with you at that time was I really saw the community college system offices, just the community college in general, as these places of education that are close to people's homes throughout the state. And I believe we have 58 community colleges. Is that
correct.
correct?
Yeah.
And they're all in the different counties and close to people's homes. And I saw this as areas of places where we can get people with disabilities trained and educated. And that's when you and I connected and we started looking at this. And so, you as the person who's the associate director of the disability services, what have you seen, like what's going on in the disability education? How are the community colleges starting to attract students with disabilities and preparing them?
Well, I think one of the things that I'm always on my soapbox, and I know Mary's on, that's why Mary and I get along so well, is we're always trying to advocate and say, one of the things that the community colleges do, and we can continue to improve on that, is ensure that people with disabilities are welcome.
Yeah.
That they will be supported. Every college has at least one. Many of them have multiple disability services people that will support them with, accommodations and whatever they might need to, help support them in their learning and the social aspect of a college. And we offer many, many programs. The disability services work with all of the departments. So they work with the adult basic ed, to the career technical education, to the curriculum, to workforce continuing ed. So they work across all programs to support all of the students. And many times, it can be very challenging because, some of the students, leave high school and maybe they have been had an IEP, individual education plan, in high school, and they want a clean break. They don't want to be noticed as having a disability, and they try to go into college and try it on their own without the supports, and then they find that they do need the supports. And that's where disability services will pick it up and say, hey, we will do these accommodations to help support you. And what we're finding also in the community colleges, probably since even before COVID, is the supports that we give the students that are coming in have even more challenging disabilities with cognition, with behaviors, with depression. We're seeing a lot of mental health issues. So one of the things that we've done at the community college is we've trained a lot of instructors in mental health first aid. So we've probably trained almost 200 instructors in the last 2 years.
Wow, that's amazing.
I was overseeing all of that through the state board funding and the governor's relief fund. So,
Awesome.
we've had some challenges with the mental health issues, but we're, trying to support our students in all aspects of that. So it's not always easy. And one thing that would be helpful is, we do have a high turnover rate. We could use some more support from maybe legislators because our disability service staff work 24/7. I mean, they work so hard, but they're probably the least paid. The pay is not good, unfortunately. And I'd like to really see more support because it's such a challenging job, and they're in for it because they want to assist the students, and they have the expertise to know what kind of accommodations and know what assistive technology is. And they always have to be updated, on training, on the new latest thing. But even what Mary was talking about in the screen readers that you're talking about, they have to be experts at all of that. And it's a very challenging field, but we also have people that have been veterans in it for years and they can't think of doing anything else. They absolutely love it. And I know personally, I think it's the best team ever. You know, they are amazing people to work with, and I'm blessed just knowing, you know, the ones that I work with. And so,
No, I totally agree. I can't agree with you more. I totally agree with it. And because I didn't know about disability student services when I was in college. I learned about it in grad school, and it helped me quite a bit. And to have that support, and it's something I wish I had known in undergrad, because I don't think I would have failed out. I don't think I would have, I would have learned, I would have understood, and to get that support. So thank you, and to all.
And it's confidential. It's not like the K-12 where you go to a special classroom.
Right.
It's confidential. Yeah. Nobody really knows if you have an accommodation, unless it's extra time on testing or something, then that's kind of obvious. But most of the accommodations and most of the things that disability services is nobody knows about, just them and the students and the instructor. Yeah. And students need to be more aware of that nobody's going to, out them of having a disability. It's confidential, just between you and the disability service person. So.
Yeah. And I think that ties into, when we think about the workplace, we talk about services for students. We have these dedicated disability student services. But when it comes to employment, that's often missing, right? A lot of employees, when they need that support and that services, they don't have it. So Mary, can you explain a little bit of what Perkins is, and then we'll go into and lead into what we're doing with the Putting on Tap Talent course in the implementation. So,
okay, so Perkins is federal. There's Perkins 5. There's federal legislation that gives money to the states, and it's designated to enhance career and technical education programs. And within that is supposed to help we say level the playing field for special populations, and people with students or people with disabilities are one of those special populations. And so with Perkins funding, there's a couple of ways that it can be used. So our colleges are awarded a certain amount of Perkins funding every year, and then there's also money at the system level to do leadership projects. And so the colleges can choose to use some of that money to support special populations, or for this project that we just completed, or that we're completing now, that we've worked on together with Abler, we consider it a leadership project, because we offered a pilot program to the community colleges, and we asked some teams to sign up to take the Abler disability inclusion modules as teams, and we wanted it to be a team of people that would serve the people with disabilities from the time they come into the door until they went into employment. So we had some teams that included disability services, career coaches, the faculty, and employers, work-based learning coordinators, because to me, it's a whole team. It needs to start it needs to start before the door, because we need marketing that is welcoming and inclusive. So, that with that pilot project, we used the money to fund the project for these teams to complete the modules, and then give us feedback on what, how helpful was it, how useful was it, how has their mindset changed, and I think I still, one of the greatest comments that I think we got out of one of the focus groups was that when we asked what was something you could do immediately, and one of the work-based coordinators said, I can let employers know it is not expensive to include people with disabilities in your workforce. And I think that's another one of those misconceptions that we need to squash.
Exactly.
That's a very professional way to say it, but we need to squash that misconception that it's expensive to employ people with disabilities, because a lot of times those accommodations can either be free or are very low cost.
Yeah, less than $500. I think majority of assistive tech and support is less than $500, and people don't know that. And so we had the opportunity to pilot this with over 100 people across 13 different community colleges. But Trudie, Mary just talked about that misconception that people had. What were something that you learned that you really kind of, was kind of eye-opening from the focus groups or from the feedback we received from folks?
Well, we assume that our faculty and staff and employers know about the etiquette or know about people with disabilities. And I got my eyes wide open on, no, they don't know that information. They haven't been exposed to that information, or they didn't know about that. And the 5 modules are just beautifully outlined, and they have real people and, in the interviews that have disabilities, and they're at work, they have professional jobs, or they're working competitively. And, the people that took the modules, they didn't know that, they didn't know the basic information, even just basic etiquette. And, they were, after they took it, another comment that besides what Mary shared was that I remember one person said, I want everybody in my college to take this. They need to know this, from HR to, the maintenance workers. And I agree. And it was like, oh yes, they do. Everybody needs to know this information. And I guess we just assume, because of my background and Mary's background, this is our life. This is common knowledge for us. But I had no idea that other people didn't know about this, or didn't know that basic information. And I'm very thrilled. I hope all colleges will use these modules, and for everybody, not just CTE workers or disability services, but everybody. And I think they're so well done, and full of information,
That's very kind of you. It's something I'm very passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
We put a lot into it, and to kind of share the stories of individuals in it was something that we talk about the phrase "nothing about us without us," and so it was created, written, and produced, and everyone in it. It was really a collective group of people with all varying abilities and disabilities together, working together to put this together, and something I'm very proud of. And I think you hit it on the head. I think it's the assumption that people know, right, or people are already doing it. But I think that's something that I've learned not only from the feedback we're getting from the focus group, but when I talk to individuals, some people have talked to me about saying, oh yeah, we thought we were way behind in terms of our disability inclusion strategies. But in fact, people, everyone is like, there's like, everyone is still kind of in that early stage of that journey. And I think, people think everyone is ahead, much further along than they are. And so I think that's one of the hopes of this course, is to help open up the eyes.
Well, and when I had the opportunity to be one of the people that vetted it.
Yeah.
So, I'm an old soul. I've been in the field for over 40 years, and I thought, oh, well, what am I going to learn? And know it all. Right. No, it was enjoyable. Some of the stuff, the 5 modules, it went back and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. Or, oh, I never even thought about that.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter the experience or level of expertise that you have, you will gain something from those modules, if not vast amounts of knowledge. Or that'll come back to you and say, oh, I remember that, or I didn't, that's a different perspective. So it doesn't matter if you're a newcomer to the field or somebody that's a veteran, you will gain a lot of knowledge from taking those 5 modules.
That's awesome.
I know I did.
That's awesome to hear. Yeah. And so, Mary and Trudie, I know we're coming to the close of the episode and also on the pilot. We're right now, Mary, you're helping to analyze a lot of the qualitative data that we've collected from focus groups, and we're hoping to present this. But what's next for kind of educating people on this? And then, I think there's some conferences and events coming up. What's coming up over the next few months that people may be able to attend? I don't know if anyone's able to attend these conferences or anything, but what's coming up?
Well, we've got the System Office Conference coming up in October. I think it's the 9th and 10th. Is that correct, Trudie?
9th and 11th, I think.
Oh, ninth. Okay. So it's the North Carolina Community College System Conference, which is, there'll be representatives from all the colleges. They're presented on different things. And, the workforce is a topic, inclusive practices. There's, that's a track too. And so, this content fits nicely in multiple areas in that conference. And so we'll also be presenting to our Perkins staff here and some of our administrators. And then July 20th, we'll have the Raleigh Mayor's ADA event. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
And our senior vice president here at the system office will be speaking that day. And so there's quite a few events coming up.
Yeah, it's super exciting that, that this pilot that y'all have worked so hard to get executed and implemented and just, delivered, being an opportunity to share with others. And I can't thank you both enough for all of your commitment, your intentionality, and your just passion for this subject and topic, because it's something that I feel the same. And I'm so thankful to have two allies in you. So thank you, Mary and Trudie, for joining us today. And Annie, thank you for everything you do, and the Walk West team for helping us put this show together. And we will be back in a couple of weeks. And I think this 14th, where we have an exciting guest with our friend Elisa Hare. And I want to wish everyone a happy July 4th. And thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, Mary.
All right.